What's good, Shellitronnn here. You can call me Shells, and I'm back at again with a brand new video, and I'm gonna keep it a Bowberry biscuit. I am actually, for the first time, very excited to talk about Scott Fitterer and think about what this man brings to the Carolina Panthers as the general manager of this team for the next 5 years. Just earlier today, the team had an introductory press conference for Scott Fitterer where he, introduced himself to the Panthers fans and the media. He gave his thanks and whatnot, and he answered a lot of really good questions from the media. And one thing in particular that I liked about Scott Fitterer is that he was pretty open and honest with his answers, which is something I have to really value because, as we know, for the past few years, under Marty Herney and Ron Rivera, we would get some half answers, some half truths here and there, and responses that sometimes left you with more questions than actual answers. So I am kind of feeling what I'm getting out of Scott Fitterer right now, just from this first introductory press conference. But let's go ahead and start from the actual beginning of his press conference. This man, Scott Fitterer, came out dripped out. I like the little Panthers pin he had there. He had the dark blue paisley tie. I won't lie to you. If you can rock the paisley tie, you already got the drip meter on 100,000, okay? So Scott Fitterer won the press conference from the very beginning, but then he took it from 100,000 to about an 8 because he looked very nervous. Like scared. Actually, it felt like Dave Tepper had two mobsters to each side of him just off camera with Tommy guns hey, you better get a right answer. Don't say too much. Don't say too much and don't talk too loud because we got something for you. He looked actually very scared, very nervous, very red, like he was sweating, like he was actually scared for his job. Like he didn't just sign a 5-year deal with the team. It was very off-putting because he looked uncomfortable. And that's not what I really like to see from a guy, even though it is his very first day on the job, but it's virtual. So there was no one actually in the media room with him. It was him, the camera guy, maybe one other dude in the stands, but it felt like he was addressing a Grammy nomination. He had 100,000 people in the stands and they were all looking dead at him and no one had any idea who he was or why he was there. He looked that nervous. And that was weird to me because I've seen other interviews of him where he looked very comfortable in an interview setting, where he looked actually at ease in an interview setting. So I was a little bit confused as to what exactly made him so nervous in the first 5 minutes of this particular interview session where there was no one in front of him. But after the first 5-10 minutes, after his introductions, talking about, how grateful he was to David Tepper, that felt a little rehearsed and staged and whatnot, like he was reading off a teleprompter, but that's all cool. He started giving his thanks, his shout outs to his family, the Seahawks organization, all of his people who had connections and whatnot. After that, when he got to the question session, he seemed a little more natural, a little more at ease. So I won't take too many points off of him, for how nervous he seemed in the first 10-15 minutes of the presser. But I think it is worth noting that I am not exaggerating when I'm talking about how nervous this man looked. He looked actually frightened, terrified. I don't know what it was, but he did look actually this extremely nervous. So with that being said, let's go ahead and talk about the questions and the answers that both Scott Fitterer and Dave gave during this interview session. The first question was asked by Phil Osborne of the ABC affiliate for Charlotte. He said, when did you know it was a good fit for you and the Panthers? And Scott gave the only answer you really can in an interview. He said immediately. And let's keep it real right now. Any answer other than that would be a bad answer. If he had doubts about the Panthers or about, where the team was heading, the personnel, the cap room, all that kind of stuff, if he had mentioned those things, if he had brought up those things, he said, well, I was a little nervous because, you guys ain't been winning for real and y'all been signing these dudes to big contracts. What was Matt Khalil about? What were y'all doing there? If you even mentioned you had any sort of trepidation, the media members and the fan base would be on your head from day one. That is not what you do. The only answer you can give is, I knew right away this was a good fit. Whether it's true or not, it's the only answer you can give. So I give him his props for doing the right thing. And no matter whether he had doubts or not, he said the right thing. The next question was from Darren Gant from Panthers.com. He asked, what is the decision-making process going to be and whose responsibility is it going to be? And Dave actually answered this one. He said it's going to be, for game day decisions, it's going to be the coach. And for the 53-man roster, it's going to be Scott. So it makes sense. Scott doesn't have time. He's not really with the players all that much. He can't tell you who was going to be on the field and when and where and all that kind of stuff. Just like Matt Rule has way too many responsibilities, being a coach and whatnot, to be worried about, how we're going to build the team. There's going to be some ebb and flow, some give and take and that kind of stuff. But as far as what guy does what, they're going to stick to what they do best and what their title is for the most part. And we do get a much deeper answer to this question a little bit later on in the press conference. So let's go ahead and move on and talk about that when it comes up again. The next question came from Joe Person of The Athletic, which I have to just go ahead and mention. I gotta mention it. Joe Person pulled up to this press conference with the 2003 Avril Lavigne Skater Boy haircut. This man pulled up with the spiked hair for no apparent reason. It was a weird look. The only worst look Joe Person could have pulled up in is if his spiked hair had frosted tips and he had a goatee. He purposefully spiked his hair for this Scott Fitterer press conference when he was going to be on Zoom at his house. Kind of a weird statement to make, but it is what it is. Joe Person did ask some very good questions. He asked, when it comes to getting Scott Fitterer, were you more focused on the analytics or finding the guy who was more about the eye test? And Dave said they weren't looking for either guy in particular. They want a healthy mix between, analytics and guys who see what they see on the field and can go based off of that. But he also said that he wanted to see some checks and balances.
Sort of a checks and balances, if you want to say that, would probably be a good thing. That's something that I think me and Matt together were looking for somebody who, wanted to embrace that.
And that to me sounded like it might have been a shot at Marty Hurney, because maybe there was some disagreement between the coach and the GM on free agency, the draft, and a few other things, and there was a power struggle. It seems to me like Dave believes there's going to be a much more peaceful union between Scott Fitterer and Rev Rule, so I gotta respect that. And Joe's next question was, did you know Rev Rule? I know you have connections and whatnot. And Scott said, yeah, I knew him professionally. We have connections. We have the same agent and whatnot. But he didn't really know Matt all that much. He'd heard about him a little bit, but he wasn't on a professional level, but didn't know him as a person, didn't really hang out with him, nothing like that. So he didn't really know him, but he did say he really respected that him and Matt Rule were both developmental based guys. That's their philosophy, and that's something to really focus on, because later on in this press conference, we have to start questioning what exactly developmental based means, because he did say that, but a couple of his answers right after this make you wonder what exactly did he actually mean by developmental based. The next question came from Dave Newton, who is literally one of the worst people in sports media. He asked about Deshaun Watson, and obviously Scott Fitterer was never going to answer this question. He never said Deshaun Watson, but he said, what are your thoughts on particular players who might be on the trade block? Maybe a guy who might be in Houston. What are your thoughts on that? Scott was never going to answer that question. Dave Newton is a troll, and he's good at being a troll. I actually respect Dave Newton because he does not care at all, and ESPN keeps paying him to cover the Panthers for no apparent reason at all. Anyway, the next question was from Steve Reed from AP. He asked, what is the QB situation? What do you have? And Scott said, look, I ain't gonna get into it specifically, but you're always looking to improve. You're always looking to, find the better players. We're not 100% satisfied at any position. We want competition. We want to find the best player at every single position. So we're always looking, and we're never 100% satisfied 100% of the time. And that to me tells you exactly what you think it means. That means exactly what you think it means. I do not have to explain that at all. So let's go ahead and go to the next question, which comes from Scott Fowler from The Observer. He says, Dave has brought in his guys in the front office. What does that mean? That investment, is that important to you? And how does this affect, decision making and, accountability with the team and its performance moving forward? And Dave's answer was very illuminating. He made it 100% clear that he hears everything. This man is very aware of all the criticism. He talked about how some fans either loved or hated the Ron Rivera firing. They thought that he either, fired Marty Hurney too early, fired Marty Hurney too late. They didn't like different things about it. And he said with his guys in the front office, with his guys in positions, he can't hide from any of the criticism. He said he never hides anyway, but he said it's impossible to hide, and he takes full responsibility for how the team looks because it's his guys now, and these are the guys he has 100% confidence in moving forward. And then Scott followed that question up with an even better question. He asked, how involved are you going to be in the process? And Dave gave another very interesting answer.
What's really important to me are that the process that we go through is right. Okay, that we do the right analysis and research and background checking, and we're thorough in that. It's not just gut feels and we do double checking. But I am somebody who has some idea of how things should be run. And that's where I think my greatest strength will be and we'll all get involved in.
He said the process needs to be right. He said you got to look at analysis, look at research, and you can't just go off emotions and gut feelings. That to me also seemed like another shot at Marty. He made sure to mention that Rev Rule and Scott Fitterer were going to have the big chunk of the decisions that are going to be made for the team. But he also did say, and I quote, I think I have an idea of how things should be run. So those guys are going to be the main dudes, but don't be surprised if Dave Tepper has some influence on how things get done, on some decisions. He ain't say it outright, but he kind of did say it a little bit at the back end of his answer. So a little something to look forward to. The next question was from Jonathan Alexander, also of The Observer. He said, how aggressive do you want to be in free agency and whatnot? And what does that look like?
We're going to do a lot of transactions. We're going to look at a lot of people, bring a lot of people in the building, churn the roster on the back end, and just really take a look at a lot of different people to see what's out there, what fits our team, and how we can build this going forward. You know, nothing's going to be status quo. It's all about building and moving forward. And as a quick little aside, he did mention in the Deshaun question that he wants to be in on every deal that happens. They're going to be looking pretty aggressively at all these players they can bring in. They may not bring in everyone, obviously, but they're going to be very aggressive. And that makes me think about the question earlier where he mentioned that he's developmental based. We had a lot of the same philosophies. And we're developmental based. I believe in that. When you hear the words developmental based, you think about a team that, comes in and promotes from within, bringing in young guys that you draft, and then, making them better, developing those guys. How are you going to be developmental based, but also be very aggressive in free agency and have a lot of churn on the roster? That makes me question what exactly did he mean by that? I mean, being very aggressive and a lot of churn on the roster is very self-explanatory. There's no two ways of interpreting that. Maybe you can interpret developmental base in different ways, but you really can't when you talk about aggressive acquisitions and churn. So I do want to see how this team actually addresses free agency and the back end and young players. How much of a leash do we give these younger dudes? Meaning guys like maybe Justin Burris, Sam Franklin, and other dudes on the back end of the roster, especially the O-line, because we have literally no one left. Literally no one left. Then he was asked about what a franchise quarterback is to him. What does it mean? He gave the right answer. He said guys who can compete, guys who make other guys better, leadership, guys who don't just have, the physical traits, but also have that thing inside them, that dog. A guy that you can tell other players want to play for. His ideal quarterback was everything. And I do mean everything. That Teddy Bridgewater is not. A very clear answer to the question. The next question was from Nick Carboni of WCNC. He said, what do you see in this team and what do you want to do? He said he sees a team that actually fights. He said the team didn't win that many games last year, but you could tell there's an identity to this team, that the team does want to be in every single game, even if they're outmatched. Now I'm kind of giving some poetic license here, but he said the team might have been outmatched, but the team's going to fight. And he saw a lot of Matt Rule's fingerprints on this team, and he likes where the team is headed. The next question was from Mike Salanti of Spectrum News. He asked what his draft philosophy was, and he said, what is the importance by position? And he gave the only answer you can, and it's the only answer that's even smart. Quarterback first, and then the trenches, meaning both O-line and D-line. Self-explanatory. You have to have a quarterback you believe in, that you can trust. And if you can't protect him, and if you can't get to the other team's quarterback, you're not going to win in this league. Simple as that. It really is just as simple as that. There's no need to even go any deeper in that answer because that's how the NFL has worked for billions of years. And that's how it's going to work for the next
3 billion years to come. The next question came from Ashley Mahoney of the Charlotte Post. She asked about how the virtual world now is how we do things in sports in the NFL and how different it is. And, now we have a whole year under our belt of doing things this way. How do you look at things in 2021 and moving forward like that? Scott gave a very good answer.
I think that you have to know who a person is and what they believe in and how they, what their competitive makeup is in order to know if they're the right fit for this team. Everyone can see the physical skill set on tape, but really it comes down to who is the right person for our organization. And so I look forward to meeting all the players and figuring that out.
It's kind of tough because obviously you can do interviews online and whatnot, but what he values the most is not just physical traits, but you have to find out who a guy is. You have to find out what exactly is inside of a dude, and it's real hard to do that over Zoom because when you have a face-to-face conversation, it's a lot different. And I think that Scott is very, very in tune with culture, personalities, drive, and how much a guy wants to win and how much a guy wants to do things for the team outside of just doing things for himself and his own stats. Scott seems to know what it takes to win and what kind of players you need to have in your environment. And we have a lot of young players as well. You have to set up a culture and set up a way that things are done, and you want to have the right guys in position to do things, and you got to find out who these guys are. And it's a little bit harder to do when you have to do things through Zoom. So that was a really good answer. Turned out to be a very great question, a very poignant question from Ashley Mahoney of the Charlotte Post. Overall, I think Scott Fitterer did a very good press conference here. Looked very nervous in the first 10, 15 minutes, but turned it around and gave very open, I think very honest answers to these questions. And I think the media actually had, for the most part, very, very good questions to ask him. These weren't softballs. I think Scott Fitterer, he's kind of growing on me. I won't lie to you. I had questions. Didn't know if it was Schneider and Ed Dodds, who were the real big dudes in Seattle. But I'm thinking that maybe this Scott Fitterer hire, I'm going to give it a shot. I'm going to give it a chance. Let's see what we do. He did not seem like he was, completely nixing the idea of going for Deshaun Watson. And he also mentioned you want to maybe trade up, maybe trade down. He mentioned that, in Seattle, they had to always trade back because, when you're picking number 28 in the draft, there aren't blue chip players, from number 1 to about 15, 16, 17. Those are your day one impact players. But from 25 to 40, there aren't a lot of guys who are, all that difference on a huge canyon between those picks. So you can trade back. But with the 8th pick in the draft, it's very different. He said, y'all don't be winning like we do back in Seattle. Y'all know nothing about that. He said, now that I got the 8th pick, you have a lot of options. Stay at 8, trade up, trade back. Get more players. You never know what it's going to be. Maybe you use that 8th pick to trade for a player. Maybe a quarterback. Maybe from Houston. Who knows? So I'm liking what I'm seeing so far from Scott Fitterer. Let's get it. I want to see what we do this year. Free agency and the draft. You got some very big tests coming up very, very soon. Let's see what you do. What are your thoughts? Like I said, link in the description below. Also, leave all your comments in the comment section below. And as always, you already know to do with that like button.
Cheers to you, appreciate the chance. Been told y'all I been the man. Been told y'all I had the gift. Tell a friend to tell a friend. Real ones gonna recommend. Count this as another win.